They say your life flashes before your eyes right before you die. Mine didn't. All I saw was the smug, triumphant smile on my best friend's face as she leaned her head on my husband's shoulder. I was dying on a cheap, stained mattress in a dingy motel, coughing up blood while they sat in the multi-million-dollar penthouse I had paid for. Sarah took my money, my home, my husband, and eventually my will to live. When my heart finally stopped, I thought it was the end. But then I opened my eyes. The scent of cheap vanilla perfume filled my lungs. I was alive. It was exactly 2 years ago. And this time, I wasn't going to be the victim. The shrill ringing of my iPhone pierced my eardrums. I gasped, shooting up from the plush white duvet, my hands clutching my chest. My heart was hammering against my ribs, a frantic, desperate rhythm. I looked down at my hands. They were unblemished. There were no IV bruises, no track marks from the endless blood draws, no bone-thin frailty. I looked around. I was in my old bedroom in my rental in downtown Seattle. The morning sun was streaming through the blinds, casting warm, golden lines across the hardwood floor. I snatched my phone from the nightstand. The date glared back at me. October 14th, 2 years before my death. A notification popped up. Sarah Jenkins. Bestie, wake up! Today is the day we find your dream home. I brought lattes. A cold sweat broke out over my skin. Sarah. The name tasted like ash in my mouth. In my previous life, today was the exact day I bought Unit 4B at the prestigious Grandview Towers. It was meant to be my sanctuary, a place for me and my fiancé Liam Carter to start our lives. But Sarah had been crying that morning. She'd just been evicted. She had nowhere to go. I, being the pathetic, bleeding heart best friend, told her she could take the spare bedroom just for a few months. Those few months turned into a permanent residency. She subtly took over my home, rearranging my furniture, cooking meals for Liam before I got home from work, playing the fragile, helpless victim. She poisoned Liam's mind, making me out to be a cold, workaholic tyrant while she was the sweet, domestic angel. By the time I found out about their affair, they had already manipulated my finances, forged my signature on a second mortgage, and drained my accounts. The stress triggered an autoimmune disease I didn't know I had. They kicked me out, and I died with nothing. Arya, you in there? The front door of my apartment clicked open. Sarah always had a spare key. I got your favorite, venti iced caramel macchiato. I closed my eyes, took a deep, shuddering breath, and forced my face into a mask of pure, unadulterated joy. I walked out into the living room. There she was, Sarah Jenkins, her wide, innocent blue eyes, her perfectly tousled blonde hair, wearing a slightly oversized sweater that made her look small and delicate. "Sarah!" I shrieked, running over and throwing my arms around her. I hugged her tight, suppressing the urge to wrap my hands around her throat. "I'm so excited." "Me too," she giggled, handing me the coffee. "Grandview Towers, right? You're going to be a homeowner. I'm so jealous. I wish I could afford a place like that." This was her opening move. In my past life, this was when I promised her the spare room. This time, I took a long sip of my coffee and smiled. "Actually, Sarah, I was thinking about that," I said, keeping my tone light and breezy. "You know, the unit next to the one I'm looking at, Unit 4C, is also up for sale. It's a foreclosure. The bank is practically giving it away. Why don't you buy it?" Sarah blinked, her doe eyes widening in genuine surprise. Me? Arya, you know I don't have that kind of money. My credit score is a joke since my ex ruined it. But think about it, I pressed, walking over to my kitchen island and leaning against it. We could be neighbors, best friends living right next door to each other. We could share a balcony view. And honestly, buying real estate is the only way to build wealth. You don't want to be renting forever, do you? Well, no, but I can help you figure out the financing, I lied smoothly. Just come look at it with me today. No pressure. But I really think it's meant to be. I knew exactly what Unit 4C was. In my past life, no one bought 4C for over a year. When someone finally did, it made the local news. The unit was functionally a biohazard. The previous owner had illegally altered the plumbing, causing a massive, slow leak between the walls. The entire structural framing of that specific unit was rotting from toxic Stachybotrys chartarum, black mold. The HOA board was notoriously corrupt and had buried the inspection reports. Furthermore, the building directly adjacent to 4C's bedroom windows was secretly scheduled for demolition to build a high-rise, which would plunge 4C into perpetual darkness and deafening construction noise for 3 years. Unit 4B, the one I was buying, was on the opposite side of the structural firewall, perfectly safe. Okay, Sarah said, a spark of greed finally flashing in her eyes. I'll look at it, but I'm telling you, I can't afford it. We'll see, I smiled. Oh, I was going to make sure she afforded it, even if it ruined her. The Grandview Tower's lobby was just as opulent as I remembered. Marble floors, crystal chandeliers, and a snooty concierge. Our realtor, Jessica Hayes, was waiting for us with a clipboard and a bright, rehearsed smile. Arya, so wonderful to see you again, Jessica beamed. And this must be Sarah. Yes, I said, linking my arm through Sarah's. We're actually interested in looking at both 4B and 4C today. Sarah's thinking about becoming my neighbor. Jessica's smile faltered for a fraction of a second. It was a micro-expression, but I caught it. She knew about 4C. She was legally obligated to disclose certain things, but foreclosure as-is properties had loopholes, and Jessica was a shark who just wanted her commission. Oh, well, that's exciting, Jessica recovered quickly. Let's head up. Unit 4B was gorgeous. High ceilings, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the Seattle skyline, pristine hardwood floors. I walked through it with a sense of grim nostalgia. I told Jessica I would take it, paying cash with the inheritance my grandmother had left me. The same money Sarah and Liam had stolen in my previous life. Then, we walked across the hall to 4C. The moment the door opened, a thick, sweet, masking scent of industrial air freshener hit us. They had pumped the place full of ozone and vanilla to hide the damp, earthy smell of rot beneath the floorboards. To the untrained eye, it looked like a steal. It had the same layout as my unit, just mirrored. It's a bit of a fixer-upper in terms of paint, Jessica said smoothly, waving her hand around the slightly yellowed walls. But the bones are excellent. And because it's a bank-owned foreclosure, it's listed at 30% below market value. I watched Sarah's eyes dart around the room. She was calculating. She walked over to the window, looking out at the low-rise brick building next door. It's a little dark in here. Oh, but the privacy, I chimed in, coming up behind her. You won't have the glaring sun waking you up at 5 a.m., And think about the aesthetic, Sarah. Moody, chic, cozy. Plus, we'd be right next door. We can leave our doors unlocked. It's amazing, Sarah whispered, the vanity and entitlement taking over. She wanted the Grandview Towers address. She wanted the prestige. She wanted to tell guys she met at bars that she lived here. But Aria, they want a huge down payment. The bank won't approve me. Leave that to me, I said softly, squeezing her shoulder. That evening, Liam came over to my rental. Seeing him again felt like swallowing broken glass. He was devastatingly handsome, with his dark hair and concerned hazel eyes. The same eyes that would later watch me die without a shred of pity. "Hey, beautiful," he smiled, leaning in to kiss me. I turned my cheek slightly so his lips grazed my jaw. I couldn't stomach his touch, not yet. "Long day?" he asked, dropping onto my sofa. "A productive one," I said, pouring 2 glasses of wine. "I put the offer in on 4B, and I convinced Sarah to look at 4C. Liam frowned. "Sarah? How is she going to afford a place in the Grandview? Didn't she just ask you to borrow $500 for her car repairs last week?" "She did," I said, feigning innocent concern. "But she's my best friend, Liam. I want her to succeed. I actually set her up with a private broker I know, Richard Sterling. He specializes in unconventional loans." Richard Sterling wasn't just a broker. He was a predatory lender operating on the fringes of legality. He offered astronomical interest rates and ironclad contracts with balloon payments that were designed to force borrowers into default so he could seize the asset. In my past life, Sarah had introduced me to him when she convinced me to take out a loan for a business venture she wanted to start. "Is that safe?" Liam asked, actually sounding sensible for once. "It's her only option," I sighed, playing the supportive friend. I told her to read the paperwork carefully, but she's just so desperate to live near me. You know how she gets. She wants the luxury lifestyle. I planted the seed perfectly. I watched Liam's expression shift from concern to mild judgment. In my past life, I had always defended Sarah, making her look like a saint who just had bad luck. This time, I was letting him see her greed. The next day, Sarah signed the papers with Richard Sterling. She put down a meager deposit she scrambled together by maxing out 3 different credit cards and financed the rest at an eye-watering 14% interest rate with a massive balloon payment due in 3 years. When she showed me the keys to 4C, her hands were shaking with excitement. "I can't believe it, Aria. I'm a homeowner," she squealed, hugging me. "I can't believe it either, Bestie," I smiled, looking over her shoulder at the shiny brass key. "Welcome to your tomb, Sarah." Moving day was a stark contrast in realities. I hired professional movers who carefully transported my curated furniture into 4B. Sarah, strapped for cash, recruited a bunch of guys from a local pub to haul her cheap particle board furniture into 4C. I ordered gourmet pizza and champagne for both our units, playing the generous hostess. Liam was there, helping me unpack boxes in the kitchen. "Your friend's crew tracked mud all over the hallway carpet," Liam muttered, wiping a spot off my new granite countertops. "The HOA is going to fine her." "Oh, don't be mean, Liam," I chided gently, though inside I was thrilled. "She's just trying her best." Later that evening, after the movers left, Sarah came over to my unit. She looked exhausted, her hair plastered to her forehead with sweat. But there was also a frantic, nervous energy about her. "Hey," she said, leaning against my doorframe, "does your apartment smell weird?" I paused, setting down a stack of plates. Weird how? Like fresh paint? No, Sarah frowned, sniffing the air in my pristine, citrus-scented kitchen. Like wet dirt and old socks. I don't smell anything, Liam said, walking up behind me. It's probably just the vents, I offered sympathetically. The building has been empty for a bit. Just buy some plug-ins, Sarah. It'll fade. It wasn't going to fade. The heavy masking agents the bank had used in 4C were wearing off. The black mold hidden behind her drywall was breathing. Over the next 2 weeks, the facade of Sarah's perfect new life began to crumble rapidly. It started with the headaches. Every morning, Sarah would text me complaining of a severe migraine and a scratchy throat. She blamed it on the stress of the move. Then came the humidity. It was late October, crisp and cool outside, but inside 4C, the air felt thick and clammy. One evening, Liam and I were watching a movie in my living room when a frantic pounding erupted at my front door. I paused the TV, my lips curving into a ghost of a smile, before I composed my features into a mask of worry and opened the door. Sarah stood there in her pajamas, looking disheveled and frantic. "Arya, I need to use your shower," she blurted out, pushing past me into the apartment. "Whoa, what's wrong?" Liam asked, standing up. "My water is brown," Sarah cried, her voice pitching into hysteria. I turned on the bathtub and it looked like literal mud. And there's a weird squishy spot on my bathroom floor. "Brown water?" Liam grimaced. "Have you called the building manager?" I did. They said because it's inside my unit, it's my responsibility. They gave me a number for a plumber. The plumber wants $300 just to come look at it. I don't have $300. She turned to me, her eyes brimming with calculated tears. This was the moment. This was where she usually broke me down. The puppy dog eyes, the trembling lip. "Arya, please, I'm so scared. Can you just lend me the money? I'll pay you back, I swear." I took her hands in mine. They were cold and clammy. "Sarah, I am so sorry," I said, my voice dripping with honeyed sympathy. "But I just put all my liquid cash into the closing costs and the new furniture for this place. I literally don't have a dime to spare until my next paycheck." Sarah's face hardened for a fraction of a second. She wasn't used to hearing the word no from me. But what am I supposed to do?" she stammered. "You're a homeowner now, Sarah," I said, patting her hands and gently stepping back. "It comes with responsibilities. Maybe you can put it on one of your credit cards? Or call Richard Sterling. Maybe he can offer a microloan against your equity." The horror on her face was exquisite. She knew she was maxed out. She knew Richard Sterling would eat her alive. "Yeah, Sarah," Liam chimed in, crossing his arms. I could tell he was annoyed by the intrusion. In the past, he thought she was a victim because I painted her as one. Now, seeing her demand money from me when she insisted on buying a luxury apartment she couldn't afford, he just saw her as irresponsible. "You can't expect Arya to bail you out. Use our shower tonight, but you need to handle your own plumbing." Sarah stared at Liam, shocked. She hadn't had the time to work her manipulative magic on him yet. He wasn't under her spell. "Right," Sarah whispered, her eyes darting between us. "Right. I'll figure it out." As she shuffled toward the guest bathroom, I locked eyes with Liam and gave a helpless, sad shrug. He rolled his eyes and pulled me against his chest, kissing the top of my head. "You're too good to her," he murmured. "I just want her to be independent," I whispered into his shirt. The next morning, the real nightmare began. A loud, official-sounding knock echoed down the hallway. I peeked through the peephole. It was a man in a high-vis vest and a hard hat, taping a neon orange notice to Sarah's door. I waited until he left, then opened my door and stepped out into the hall to read it. City of Seattle. Demolition notice. Adjacent property lot 402 slated for explosive demolition and foundation excavation. Beginning November 1st. Expected duration, 18 months. Noise ordinance variances approved. I smiled, tracing the black lettering with my fingertip. The building next door, the one exactly 5 feet from Sarah's only windows, was coming down. I pulled out my phone and took a quick picture of the notice. I didn't send it to her. I wanted her to find it herself. The trap was set. The jaws had snapped shut, and Sarah Jenkins was entirely alone in the dark. November 1st arrived with the subtlety of a localized earthquake. At exactly 6 a.m., a bone-rattling boom echoed through the Grandview Towers, followed by a mechanical roar that sounded like a jet engine warming up in the hallway. I was already awake, sipping a freshly brewed espresso in my soundproofed, sunlit kitchen in Unit 4B. The firewall in the building's reinforced core insulated me from the worst of it. Unit 4C, however, shared a direct exterior wall with the demolition site. I heard a muffled scream through the corridor, followed by a frantic pounding on my door. I took a leisurely sip of my coffee, checked my reflection in the microwave door to ensure my face looked appropriately concerned, and opened it. Sarah was a chaotic mess. She was clutching a silk robe around her, her hair standing on end, her face pale beneath a layer of fine gray dust. "Arya, are we under attack? Did a bomb go off?" she shrieked, coughing violently into her elbow. "Sarah, calm down," I said, putting a reassuring hand on her arm. "It's just a demolition next door. Didn't you read the notice the city taped to your door last week?" "What notice?" Her eyes went wide, panic setting in. "Demolition. Next door. But my windows face that building." "I know, isn't it crazy?" I sighed, shaking my head. "Apparently, they're tearing down the old brick complex to build a 30-story glass high-rise. They're going to be excavating the foundation for the next 18 months. I thought Jessica mentioned it during the walkthrough." "No?" "Oh, these realtors, they always omit the ugly details." Sarah looked like she was going to be sick. The heavy machinery next door revved up again, and the floorboards beneath our feet vibrated. 18 months, she whispered, her voice trembling. "Arya, it shook my apartment so hard a picture frame fell off the wall and shattered. And the dust, it's coming right through the window seals." "Well, you'll just have to keep your windows closed, sweetie," I said soothingly. "And invest in some heavy blackout curtains. With the scaffolding going up, you won't get much sunlight anyway." Over the next month, the true horror of Unit 4C revealed itself. The demolition noise was a constant, grueling soundtrack from 6 a.m. to 6 p.m., 6 days a week. It wore down Sarah's nerves, leaving her perpetually exhausted and irritable. But the noise was nothing compared to the rot. Without sunlight to dry it out, and with the heavy vibrations exacerbating the hidden plumbing leak, the Stachy Bowtree's charter room, toxic black mold, exploded behind her drywall. It started as a faint, musty odor that the vanilla plug-ins could no longer mask. Then, the walls in her bathroom began to blister. Dark, fuzzy, greenish-black spots bloomed along the baseboards like a plague. I watched her physical decline with clinical fascination. In my previous life, it was me who withered away. My hair had fallen out, my skin had turned a sickly gray, and my lungs had burned with every breath. Now it was Sarah's turn. "I can't stop coughing," she complained one evening, sitting on my pristine velvet sofa. She looked haggard. She had dark circles under her eyes, and a red, angry rash was creeping up her neck. And I have this constant headache. I think I'm allergic to the dust from the construction. "Have you been to a doctor?" Liam asked. He was sitting in the armchair across from her, his laptop open. "I don't have health insurance right now," Sarah admitted, her voice adopting that pathetic, wavering tone she used to manipulate men. "And I'm so broke, Liam. The HOA sent me a massive fine because my bathtub overflowed and leaked into the hallway. The plumber said the pipes in the wall are completely corroded." She looked at Liam, her eyes brimming with unshed tears. This was it. The pivot. In my past life, this was when Liam would step in, offer to pay for her repairs, and start spending hours in her apartment fixing things while I was at work. I preempted her. "Oh, Sarah, that's terrible," I interjected, stepping between her line of sight and Liam. I handed her a cup of tea. "But you know, I was talking to Mrs. Higgins, the HOA president, in the lobby yesterday. She mentioned that Unit 4C was sold as is in the foreclosure. The bank had documentation about the faulty plumbing, which means you legally assumed the risk when you signed the paperwork." I turned to Liam. "Can you believe the broker, Richard Sterling, didn't make sure she had a contingency fund? It's almost predatory." Liam frowned, his lawyer brain engaging. "Sterling? The guy who did your loan. Sarah, you signed an ass's foreclosure contract without an independent inspection?" I thought it was a good deal," she stammered. "It's financial suicide," Liam said bluntly, lacking any of the sympathy she was fishing for. "If the pipes are corroded inside the walls, you're looking at a $10,000 repiping job, plus mold remediation. You need to take out a personal loan, or you're going to lose the place." "I can't get another loan," Sarah snapped, the mask of the sweet victim slipping for a second to reveal the panicked, angry woman underneath. "My credit is maxed." "Then you need to get a second job," Liam said, his tone cold. "You can't just ignore it. It's affecting the building." Sarah stared at him, stunned. She wasn't used to Liam being immune to her charm. But I had spent the last 2 months subtly painting a picture of Sarah to him, not as a tragic victim of circumstance, but as a reckless, financially irresponsible opportunist who was trying to live out of her league. As she left my apartment that night, coughing into her fist, I felt a dark, satisfying thrill. The physical trap was springing shut. It was time for her to try her desperate final play. By December, Sarah was drowning. Richard Sterling, the loan shark I had introduced her to, was relentless. He started sending aggressively worded letters threatening default and foreclosure because she had missed a payment. The balloon interest rate was suffocating her. Her apartment was practically unlivable. The mold had spread from the bathroom to the shared wall of the bedroom. The stench was so pungent that her clothes constantly smelled like a damp basement. She tried to hide it with cheap, overpowering perfume, creating a nauseating concoction of floral chemicals and decay. Desperation breeds audacity. Sarah realized her only way out was the same ticket she used in my past life. Liam. Liam was a successful corporate lawyer on the partner track. He had money, he had stability, and in her mind, he was an easy mark. She just needed to pry him away from me. She started showing up in the hallway, right when he came home from work. I had installed a discreet, motion-activated peephole camera on my door, so I watched her orchestrate these accidental meetings from my phone. One Tuesday evening, the camera notified me of movement. I opened the app. Sarah was standing in the hall. She was wearing a silk camisole that dipped dangerously low and short athletic shorts, despite the December chill. She was holding a heavy toolkit she must have bought at a pawn shop. When the elevator chimed and Liam stepped out, looking exhausted in his tailored suit, Sarah immediately dropped the toolkit. It hit the floor with a loud metallic clatter. "Oh, shoot!" she gasped, dropping to her knees to gather the scattered wrenches and screwdrivers. The angle gave Liam a direct plunging view down her top. "Hey, let me help you with that," Liam said, his polite instincts kicking in. He knelt down beside her. "Thank you, Liam," she breathed, looking up at him through her lashes. "I'm just so overwhelmed. I was trying to fix the hinge on my front door, but I'm just so useless at this stuff. I wish I had a strong man around to help me out." She placed her hand over his as they both reached for a hammer. She let it linger. I watched the screen, my heart pounding, a ghost of the old betrayal flaring in my chest. In my past life, this was how it started. She made him feel needed. She played to his ego. But this time, things were different. Liam gently pulled his hand away and stood up, brushing off his suit pants. "You should really call the building maintenance guy, Sarah. Messing with the fire-rated doors yourself is an HOA violation." "I know, but they charge by the hour," she pouted, standing up and stepping closer to him. The motion caused a waft of her perfume and mold scent to hit him. I saw Liam visibly flinch, his nose wrinkling. "Sarah, I don't mean to be rude, but are you dealing with a leak in there?" Liam asked, taking a subtle step back toward our door. "It smells like mildew. You really need to get that checked out. It's a massive health hazard." "It's just the damp from the construction," she deflected quickly, looking embarrassed. "But Liam, could you maybe just come in for 5 minutes and look at the hinge? Please? I'm so scared the door won't lock." She reached out to grab his bicep. I timed it perfectly. I yanked my front door open, holding 2 glasses of expensive red wine, wearing a stunning, form-fitting black dress that Liam loved. "Babe, you're home," I beamed, acting completely oblivious. "Oh, hey, Sarah. Everything okay out here?" Sarah yanked her hand back from Liam's arm as if she'd been burned. "Fine. I was just asking Liam a question about a door hinge." "Liam's a lawyer, sweetie, not a carpenter," I laughed, handing Liam a glass of wine. He took it gratefully, stepping past Sarah and into our apartment. "If you need a handyman, I can give you the number of the guy we used to mount our TV. He's very affordable." "No, that's okay," Sarah muttered, her face flushed with humiliation. She grabbed her toolkit and scurried back into her dark, foul-smelling apartment, slamming the door shut. As soon as we were inside, Liam took a long sip of his wine and sighed. "Arya, we need to talk about your friend," he said, loosening his tie. "What about her?" I asked innocently. "She's a mess," he said bluntly, "and I think she's trying to cross boundaries. She was practically throwing herself at me in the hallway just now, dressed like she was going to a club. And honestly, she smells terrible, like a wet dog. I bit the inside of my cheek to stop myself from grinning. Liam, she's just going through a hard time. The construction is stressful. It's more than that, Liam insisted. I saw a letter on the mailroom floor yesterday. It fell out of her box. It was a pre-foreclosure notice from Sterling's firm. She's drowning in debt, Arya. I'm warning you. She's going to start asking you for serious money soon. Do not give it to her. She's a sinking ship, and she'll pull you down with her. I promise. I won't give her a dime, I said, leaning up to kiss him. He had no idea. I wasn't just watching her sink. I had drilled the hole in the bottom of the boat. The climax of Sarah's desperation arrived the week before Christmas. I had decided to host a lavish holiday dinner party for Liam's colleagues. It was crucial for his promotion to partner, and I wanted everything to be flawless. I hired a private chef, bought a 10-foot Fraser fir tree that touched the ceiling of my pristine living room, and invited 3 of the senior partners from Liam's firm, including the notoriously strict Greg Peterson and their wives. I explicitly did not invite Sarah, but I knew she would crash it. She couldn't stand being left out of anything that involved wealth, networking, or the opportunity to latch onto someone successful. By 8 p.m., the party was a roaring success. The champagne was flowing. Soft jazz was playing over the surround sound system, and Greg Peterson was laughing loudly at a joke Liam had made. I was playing the perfect hostess, circulating with a tray of caviar blinis. Then the doorbell rang. I exchanged a look with Liam. All the guests were already here. Liam walked over and opened the door. There stood Sarah. If I hadn't hated her so much, I might have pitied her. She was wearing a tight, red sequin dress that was far too aggressive for an elegant dinner party. Her blonde hair, usually perfectly styled, looked stringy and dull. The red rash from the mold exposure had spread from her neck to her chest, which she had tried to cover with heavy, cakey foundation. And the smell. Oh God, the smell. Even from across the room, I could detect the sharp, toxic scent of mildew masked by cheap vanilla. Hey, she chirped, her voice overly loud and strained. I heard music. Am I late to the party? The room fell completely silent. The wives of the senior partners stopped mid-sentence, turning to stare at the disheveled woman in the doorway. Greg Peterson wrinkled his nose in obvious distaste. Sarah, Liam said, his voice dropping to a low, warning tone. This is a private, work-related dinner. Oh, come on, Liam, she slurred slightly. I realized with a jolt that she was drunk. Liquid courage. I'm Arya's best friend. I live right next door. You can't have a Christmas party without me. Before Liam could stop her, she pushed past him and stumbled into the living room. Wow, look at all this, she said, waving a hand at the catered spread. Must be nice to have so much money you don't know what to do with it. I stepped forward smoothly, placing my tray down. Sarah, you seem a bit unwell. Why don't I walk you back to your apartment? I'm fine, she snapped, batting my hand away. She zeroed in on Liam, who was standing near Greg Peterson. She walked straight toward him, her heels clicking unsteadily on the hardwood. You know, you guys, she addressed the room at large, but kept her eyes fixed on Liam. Liam is the best. He's so strong and smart, and he always knows how to fix things. Right, Liam? Remember how you promised you'd come look at my door hinge? It was a blatant, pathetic attempt to imply something intimate between them in front of his bosses. In my past life, Liam would have nervously laughed it off, trying to save face, inadvertently making it look like they did have a secret. But this Liam despised her. Liam didn't laugh. His jaw locked. "Sarah, you are intoxicated, and you are embarrassing yourself. I never promised to fix your door. I told you to call maintenance." "Oh, stop playing hard to get," she giggled, reaching out and placing her hand flat on his chest, right over his tie. "I know you're bored with Arya's little perfect wife routine. Why don't you come next door later? I have some wine." A collective gasp echoed from the partners' wives. Greg Peterson looked appalled. "Get your hands off me," Liam said, his voice like cracking ice. He physically swatted her hand away. "You are completely out of line. You need to leave. Now." Sarah blinked, stunned by the harsh physical rejection. The alcohol and the toxic mold exposure were frying her brain. She started to sway, her breathing growing ragged. You're so mean to me," she whimpered, the tears finally overflowing. "Everyone is so mean. My apartment is rotting and the bank is taking it, and no one will help me." Suddenly she doubled over and began to cough. It wasn't a normal cough. It was a deep, wet, rattling sound that tore from the bottom of her lungs. She couldn't stop. She hacked violently, her face turning purple. "A good Lord," Greg Peterson muttered, taking a step back as if she were contagious. "Is she sick?" "She has toxic mold in her apartment because she refused to pay for plumbing repairs," Liam said loudly and clearly, ensuring every person in the room understood the situation. "Arya, call building security." "No!" Sarah gasped, straightening up, her eyes wild and bloodshot. A small trickle of dark blood leaked from her nose, cutting through the heavy foundation on her upper lip. The spores had done their damage. She looked at me. The hatred in her eyes was pure, unadulterated venom. For a second, I saw the woman who had watched me die on that motel mattress. "You did this?" she hissed at me, pointing a trembling, blood-specked finger. "You made me buy that place. You trapped me." I looked back at her, my face a picture of serene, sorrowful shock. "Sarah, I don't know what you're talking about," I said softly, ensuring the guests heard my gentle, victimized tone. "I only wanted us to be neighbors. I had no idea you were in such financial trouble. If you needed help, you should have just asked, instead of trying to hit on my husband in front of his colleagues." The building security guards arrived 2 minutes later, summoned by the concierge whom I had quietly texted the moment Sarah barged in. They flanked her, taking her by the arms. "Don't touch me," she shrieked, struggling against them as they dragged her toward the door. "Arya, you bitch! I'll ruin you!" The heavy oak door of Unit 4B clicked shut, cutting off her screams. The silence in the living room was deafening. I put my hands over my face and let out a perfectly timed, shuddering sob. Liam was beside me in an instant, wrapping his arms around me. "I am so sorry, Arya. I should have never let her through the door." "It's not your fault," Greg Peterson said gruffly, looking at me with sympathy. "You can't control unhinged people. You handled that with absolute grace, Arya. Liam, you've got a wonderful woman here. Defended your honor and hers." I buried my face in Liam's chest, hiding the vicious, triumphant smile that stretched across my face. Sarah was ruined. Her reputation was destroyed. Her health was failing, and her finances were obliterated. But the best part, was yet to come. Because tomorrow, the eviction notice from Richard Sterling was scheduled to arrive, and I was the one who had anonymously bought her debt. The morning after the dinner party was blissfully quiet. The demolition crew next door had taken the week off for the Christmas holidays, leaving a heavy, expectant silence over the Grandview Towers. I woke up early, the sunlight filtering through the frost-tipped windows of Unit 4B, and poured myself a cup of dark roast coffee. I sat at my kitchen island, listening. I was waiting for the knock. At exactly 9 a.m., the heavy, authoritative thud of a fist on a wooden door echoed through the hallway. It wasn't my door. I slipped off my bar stool, padded softly in my cashmere socks to the front door, and pressed my eye to the discreet peephole camera monitor. A man in a cheap gray suit stood outside Unit 4C, holding a thick manila folder, a process server. The door to 4C cracked open, still chained from the inside. Sarah's face appeared in the narrow gap. She looked entirely destroyed. The heavy makeup from the night before was smeared under her eyes like bruised shadows, and she was coughing into a tissue. "Sarah Jenkins?" the man asked, his voice echoing in the empty hall. "Who wants to know?" she croaked. "I have a summons and complaint for foreclosure, and a formal notice of eviction on behalf of the lien holder. You have 72 hours to vacate the premises before the sheriff's department arrives to physically remove you and your belongings." He shoved the thick envelope through the crack in the door, not waiting for her to take it. It fell to the hardwood floor with a heavy final slap. Sarah stared down at it. "Wait! No! I talked to Richard Sterling. I told him I just needed another month to restructure the balloon payment." "Mr. Sterling's firm no longer holds your mortgage, ma'am," the server said, already walking toward the elevator. "Your debt was sold to a secondary collection entity. Good luck." The elevator doors swallowed him, leaving Sarah alone in the hallway. She unchained her door, picked up the envelope with trembling hands, and ripped it open. I watched her eyes dart back and forth as she read the legal jargon. Then her gaze stopped, her brow furrowed in confusion, and she looked up, staring directly at my closed door. She marched across the hall and pounded on my door. "Arya! Arya! Open up!" I took a deep breath, smoothing my silk robe, and opened the door with a perfectly calibrated expression of mild annoyance. "Sarah, please. It's early. After last night, I really think you should just—" "What is this?" she demanded, shoving the foreclosure notice into my chest. "What the hell is this?" I took the paper, pretending to scan it. "It looks like an eviction notice, Sarah. It says you defaulted on the loan, and the new owner of the debt is seizing the property." "I know what an eviction notice is," she screamed, her voice cracking. "Look at the name of the holding company. Look at the plaintiff." I looked down at the bold black ink at the top of the page. Plaintiff, Oak Haven Agricultural Legacy and Holding, LLC. "Oh," I said softly, a genuine, terrifying smile finally breaking across my face. "That." "Oak Haven," Sarah breathed, her eyes wide with a mixture of dawning horror and sheer disbelief. "That was your grandfather's farm, the one in eastern Washington, the one you inherited." "It was," I nodded, leaning against my doorframe and crossing my arms. "You remember? You used to make fun of it. You called it dirt money. You said I was a fool for holding on to a bunch of rusty tractors and muddy acres while we were living in the city." You bought my debt?" She stumbled backward, clutching her head. "How? How could you afford that? Richard Sterling's portfolio is worth millions." It was time to tell her exactly how badly she had underestimated me. In my past life, Sarah had convinced me to quietly sell the farm and invest the cash into her bogus startup, the startup she used to siphon my wealth into Liam's accounts. I had handed away my family's multi-generational legacy for nothing. What you didn't understand about Oakhaven, Sarah, is that my grandfather didn't just grow wheat. He was a mechanical genius, I explained, keeping my voice level, almost conversational. He held over a dozen patents for agricultural technology, specifically concerning the diagnostic software and physical schematics for heavy tractor maintenance. He was a pioneer in the right-to-repair movement for farmers. When I inherited the estate, I didn't just get dirt. I got intellectual property. Sarah just stared at me, her mouth opening and closing like a suffocating fish. A month ago, a major agricultural conglomerate bought those patents from me, I continued, savoring every syllable, for a very, very large sum of money. I didn't want to just sit on the cash. I wanted to diversify. So I set up Oakhaven Legacy LLC, and I started buying distressed debt. High-risk, high-reward portfolios. When I saw your name in Richard Sterling's default pile, I just couldn't resist. "You set me up," she whispered, the realization hitting her with the force of the wrecking ball next door. "You told me to buy this place. You introduced me to Sterling. You knew about the demolition. You knew about the mold." "I didn't make you sign anything, Sarah," I said coldly, shedding the sweet best friend persona completely. The mask was off. "You signed the as-is contract. You took the predatory loan because you wanted to look rich. You wanted the Grandview Towers address. You wanted what I had, just like you always do." "You're a monster," she hissed, tears spilling over her mascara-stained cheeks. "I'm your best friend. How could you do this to me?" "Because," I leaned in closer, dropping my voice to a lethal whisper, "I know exactly who you are, Sarah. I saw the way you looked at my husband. I saw you try to seduce him last night. You are a parasite. And I simply decided to stop being your host." I stepped back and gripped the edge of my door. "You have 72 hours. I suggest you start packing. The mold is ruining your clothes anyway." I slammed the door in her face. For the first time in 2 lifetimes, my chest felt incredibly light. The rot was finally being excised. Sarah didn't go quietly. I didn't expect her to. A parasite fights the hardest when it's being ripped from the host. She spent the next 48 hours frantically trying to find a legal loophole. She called legal aid, she called the city housing authority, and she even tried to call Liam at his law firm, begging him to represent her pro bono against my holding company. Liam came home that evening looking furious. "Did she actually call your office?" I asked, pouring him a glass of scotch as he threw his briefcase onto the sofa. "She called my private line," Liam said, rubbing his temples. "She was hysterical, mumbling about agricultural patents and you being a slumlord. I told my secretary to block her number. But Aria, she said something concerning on the voicemail." I paused, the crystal decanter hovering over his glass. "What did she say?" "She said the loan documents she signed with Sterling were invalid." Liam frowned, looking deeply troubled. I pulled her public filing out of professional curiosity. "Aria, she bought a $900,000 apartment with no down payment and a credit score in the toilet. How did she get approved, even by a shark like Sterling?" "I assumed she just accepted an insane interest rate," I lied smoothly. She did, but you still need proof of income, Liam said. He pulled a folded piece of paper from his inner suit pocket and laid it on the kitchen island. I had a buddy at Sterling's firm fax me the income verification page from her application. I looked down at the document. It was a formal letter stating that Sarah Jenkins was a senior consultant making a base salary of $180,000 a year. But what made my blood run cold with sudden brilliant joy was the letterhead. It was printed on the official stationery of Liam's law firm. And at the bottom, verifying her employment, was Liam's forged signature. "She forged your name," I breathed, staring at the paper. In my past life, she had forged my signature to take out a second mortgage on our home. It seemed old habits died hard. She falsified documents using my identity and my firm's credentials to secure a fraudulent mortgage, Liam said, his voice deadly quiet. The anger radiating from him was palpable. If this gets out, it could compromise my standing with the state bar. She didn't just try to seduce me, Arya. She actively put my entire career in jeopardy to fund her delusion. "What are you going to do?" I asked, my heart singing. "I already did it," Liam said, finishing his scotch in one swallow. "I called the district attorney's office. Fraud of this magnitude, utilizing a law firm's identity. It's a felony. They're issuing a warrant for her arrest." The trap hadn't just snapped shut. It had utterly pulverized her. The 72 hours expired on a bleak, gray Thursday morning. The demolition next door was back in full swing, the heavy thumping shaking the floorboards. I stood in my doorway as the elevator dinged. 2 uniformed sheriff's deputies stepped out, accompanied by an official from the Seattle Department of Health and Human Services. They knocked on 4C. When Sarah didn't answer, the building superintendent, who was standing nervously nearby, keyed them in. I stepped out into the hallway to watch the grand finale. The moment the door opened, the health inspector visibly recoiled. The stench of the Stacky Bowtree's charter room had reached critical mass. The walls inside the apartment were practically black. "Good Lord," the inspector muttered, pulling a heavy N95 mask over his face. "This structure is compromised. The spore count in here must be astronomical." "Sarah Jenkins?" one of the deputies called out, stepping carefully over a pile of rotting, waterlogged mail on the floor. Sarah was huddled on her cheap sofa in the center of the living room. She was clutching a blanket around her shoulders. She looked like a ghost. Her skin was a sickly, translucent gray. Her hair was falling out in small patches from the severe allergic reaction, and she was coughing so hard she couldn't speak. "Sarah Jenkins, you are officially evicted from this premises by order of the court," the deputy said, his hand resting casually on his utility belt. "Furthermore, I have a warrant for your arrest for felony wire fraud and identity theft. Stand up and put your hands behind your back." Sarah looked up, her eyes glassy and unfocused. She saw me standing in the hallway, watching her. "Arya," she rasped, reaching a trembling hand out toward me. "Please, I'm sick. I can't breathe." I didn't move. I didn't blink. I just stared at her with the cold, unfeeling gaze she had given me as I lay dying on that motel bed. "Ma'am, stand up," the deputy repeated, stepping forward and pulling her to her feet. She was too weak to resist. He snapped the cold steel handcuffs around her wrists. The sound echoed beautifully in the ruined apartment. "This unit is officially condemned," the health inspector announced, slapping a massive red sticker on the front door. "Nobody enters without a hazmat suit. The structural rot has reached the support beams." As the deputies walked her out, dragging her stumbling feet across the expensive hallway carpet, she looked at me one last time. There was no anger left in her eyes, only a hollow, terrified emptiness. She had lost everything: her health, her home, her freedom, and the man she tried to steal. "You won," she whispered as they pushed her toward the elevator. "I know," I replied. The elevator doors closed, taking Sarah Jenkins out of my life, leaving nothing behind but the sweet, quiet victory of survival. 2 years passed. Life has a funny way of righting itself when the poison is removed from the well. Liam made partner at his law firm. The scandal with Sarah's forged documents was handled quietly, with Liam positioned as the victim of a deranged stalker, which only boosted his reputation as a man of steadfast integrity. We stayed in Unit 4B. Oak Haven Agricultural Legacy, LLC, paid for the complete remediation and rebuilding of Unit 4C. Once the toxic mold was stripped away and the plumbing replaced, I knocked down the firewall between the two apartments. I turned Sarah's nightmare into my massive, sun-drenched private art studio and library. The high-rise next door was eventually finished, but the heavy soundproofing I installed during the renovation kept my sanctuary perfectly silent. I expanded the agricultural holdings, using my grandfather's legacy to fund right-to-repair advocacy groups across the Midwest. I was thriving. I was healthy. Sarah was not. She took a plea deal for the fraud charges. Because it was a nonviolent first-time felony offense, she managed to avoid heavy prison time. But she was handed 5 years of strict probation and a massive restitution order. Her credit was permanently destroyed. Her felony record made it impossible to get a job anywhere near the corporate world she so desperately craved. I kept tabs on her, of course, not out of obsession, but out of a need for closure. You don't slay a dragon and then ignore the cave. You make sure the beast is truly dead. On a rainy Tuesday afternoon in November, exactly 2 years to the day that I had died in my past life, I decided to pay her a visit. My private investigator had tracked her down to a cheap, rundown motel on the outskirts of Tacoma, near the industrial shipping yards. As my sleek black town car pulled into the pothole-ridden parking lot, a wave of intense, visceral déjà vu washed over me. It was the exact same motel. The same flickering neon sign that buzzed like an angry hornet. The same stained concrete walkways. The same smell of stale beer and despair hanging in the damp air. I stepped out of the car, my designer trench coat wrapping tightly around me against the chill. I walked up to the second floor, my heels clicking sharply against the concrete. I stopped in front of room 214. The door was slightly ajar, propped open by a rusted paint can to let out the smell of whatever cheap food was cooking on the hot plate inside. I pushed the door open. The room was dimly lit, the only light coming from a muted, ancient television set. Sarah was sitting on the edge of the sagging mattress. She was wearing a faded, oversized uniform shirt for a local industrial laundry service. Her blonde hair, once her crowning glory, was chopped short and looked brittle. She was smoking a cheap cigarette, staring blankly at the wall. She looked up when I entered. For a long moment she didn't recognize me. Then, the cigarette slipped from her fingers, landing on the stained carpet. "Aria," she whispered, shrinking back against the headboard as if I were a ghost. "What? What are you doing here?" I walked slowly into the room, taking in the peeling wallpaper, the water stains on the ceiling, the overwhelming sense of hopelessness. It was exactly as I remembered it. Just checking in on an old friend, I said, my voice calm, devoid of any malice. Please, she whimpered, pulling her knees to her chest. Haven't you done enough? You ruined my life. I have nothing. I work 12 hours a day washing sheets just to pay for this room. My lungs are still scarred from that apartment. You won. Just leave me alone. I walked over to the bed and looked down at her. In my past life, I had been the one on that mattress. I had been the one begging for mercy while she stood over me, draped in the wealth she had stolen from me, smiling as my breath rattled to a stop. I leaned down, placing one hand on the cheap, scratchy blanket beside her leg. I leaned in close until my lips were inches from her ear. I know it hurts, Sarah, I whispered, my voice barely audible over the hum of the television. I know how the air in this room feels heavy. I know how the mattress springs dig into your spine. I know how it feels to have nothing left but regret. She froze, her breath hitching. What? I died on this exact mattress, I whispered, the truth finally slipping from my lips. A secret carried across time. You sat right where I am standing, and you smiled while my heart stopped. You took my home, my husband, and my money. You left me here to rot. Sarah stared at me, her eyes wide, uncomprehending, yet filled with a primal, instinctual terror. You're crazy. You're out of your mind. Maybe, I smiled, pulling back and standing up straight. But I'm alive, Sarah, and I'm going back to my penthouse, to my husband, and to a life I built with my own 2 hands. And you? You're going to stay exactly where you belong. I turned and walked out of room 214. I didn't look back as I walked down the concrete stairs and climbed into the back of my waiting car. As the driver pulled out of the parking lot heading back toward the Seattle skyline, I looked at my reflection in the tinted window. There was no guilt. There was no lingering anger. There was only peace. The ledger was finally balanced. The rot had been burned away. I was reborn. And this time, I was bulletproof. And that is how you rewrite history. Arya completely turned the tables, using Sarah's own greed, arrogance, and a brilliant hidden agricultural empire to trap her in the very nightmare she thought she was winning. From the toxic mold to the felony fraud, Sarah got exactly what she deserved, ending up in the very same dingy motel where Arya lost her life in the past timeline. Justice has never tasted so sweet. If you loved this epic tale of rebirth, betrayal, and ultimate revenge, please hit that like button and share it with anyone who loves a flawless karma story. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel for more insane, high-drama stories just like this one. Let me know in the comments, was Arya's revenge too harsh? Or did Sarah get exactly what she had coming? See you in the next video.